Hello, everyone. Thank you for waiting. Our next speaker is a true heavyweight in the JavaScript ecosystem. As the Nuxt core team leads and a key member of the team at Vercel, he spends his days, and likely his nights, shaping the tools that millions of developers use to build the web. His accolades are endless. He's a Microsoft MVP, a Google GDE, a GitHub star, and has even named in the 2025 Open UK New Year Honors list. But before he was a pillar of the open source world, he actually started his journey in law. Here to show us how to build tools that developers actually love using, please join me welcoming Daniel Rowe.
That was really kind, thank you. I promise I did not write the introduction. But yes, it's a pleasure to be here and to talk about designing APIs for humans, which I feel is going against the current in 2026. So every one of us here, we're all mavericks. That's the reality of it. So my name is Daniel Rowe, as Lucas said. I'm a full-time open source developer, which is the best job in the world. It's truly amazing. I get to spend all my time building tools for other people for free and collaborating with them online. And one of the things that I love most about going and giving talks, thank you very much for inviting me, was that I get to meet people who are either involved in the Nuxt community or that I'm messaging on GitHub or Discord, and it's honestly the best thing. I love it so much. I've built some other things too. I lead the team building Nuxt. That's probably the biggest project I'm involved with, but there are a few others too. So NPMX, I'll say a little bit about today. I started that just this year. There are a few others. If you want to join me in competing on solving word puzzles, you can try Pangram. It doesn't yet have Portuguese translation, so maybe you could help me out with that. And there are a few other projects I'm involved with there too. But mostly, if you do want to, go to my website, row.dev, and you can find all my social media. I'm everywhere except for Twitter, for obvious reasons. But please message me. If there's a question that you've got, something that came up today or whatever, I would love to hear from you. Drop me a line anytime. If you want to grab a coffee over the next couple of days or go bouldering or something like that, I'm down. Anyway, I live in Edinburgh. Now, the weather in Edinburgh, I've got to say, is not like Lisbon. I discovered that when I arrived yesterday and took off the 5 different layers I had on and began to bask in the sun. Everyone else was sort of walking around with jumpers and all of that, but as far as I was concerned, this was the height of summer. It's one of the benefits of living in Edinburgh. And it's also the reason, I think, why the Scottish invented whiskey, the need to cope with the weather. But it's also beautiful, so do come visit, and if you ever do come, let me know. If you visit this QR code, or go to row.dev/live, I have given you a power, which I plead with you not to abuse. You know what I mean. You can send emojis. There you go. It doesn't do anything else other than that, but yeah, you can send emojis. And yeah, that's that. So I mentioned that I lead the team building Nuxt. Nuxt is a full-stack framework for building web applications. It is not, and I cannot repeat this clearly enough, it is not Next. If you have heard of Next.js, it is not Nuxt. It was started one day after Next.js. Next.js is also a framework for building web apps, but built on React. Nuxt is based on Vue. It was started one day after, and the U is sort of a nod to Vue. But I did find out on social media a few years ago, someone was sharing their startup journey. And then they mentioned Nuxt. So obviously, I was very interested. And they said that they had instructed an agency in Australia to build them an app. And because of the accent, the agency thought they were telling them to build it with Nuxt, but they meant Next. Well, what can I say? the idea of Nuxt is a lot about what I'm going to talk about today. So it's meant to be a progressive framework, so one that goes with you as you build. It should have no friction to get started. It should build in best practice, but the idea is that as you use it, you can customize it as you need. It has got some stars and some downloads, but what I would love to know is, are you using Nuxt? This is a little moment to appreciate my cleverness, because the very observant of you will notice that I have only given you two options, yes and not yet, which I aim to subtly influence you without even you noticing to use Nuxt in the future. What emoji is that? Is that like a chipmunk or something? I have never seen it before in my life. I clearly have some work to do. Okay, amazing. I'm glad that the 7 people who've used Nuxt before, if you liked it, come find me afterwards. No, you can find me either way. I'm talking about designing APIs for humans. And first, I want to talk about designing APIs. And just the premise there is that APIs need to be designed. Because APIs, or any kind of library or program or framework, anything that you're creating to be consumed by someone else, it is a product. And I mean this with the best will in the world. I don't know what you hear when you hear me say product, because I sort of hear it as soulless, VC-backed kind of thing. I don't mean that. A product is something that somebody uses. A product is something that exists not for itself, but for a purpose. It's also something that is produced. It has an ecosystem to create it. And we're very familiar with this in the commercial world. If you're building a SaaS, you're building a product, and you know it. And it's not one person. You have a marketing team, and you have a team of engineers. You have people working on maybe SRAs, keeping everything up. But not just that, you have a whole company, lots of departments working to make this thing successful. Now, a lot of open source developers, anyone here, by the way, is anyone here an open source developer? Have you open sourced a project? I see 5. I see a lot. Amazing. I'm delighted. That's great. Okay, so there are lots. You know what I'm talking about. You don't have necessarily that many people. It's just you. But I think one of the most important paradigm shifts to engage with is the idea that actually you have to contain multitudes. You are a whole team. You are the marketing department, you are the user research, your product to the design, your engineering, your everything about the library that you're creating. Because it's not just you. The idea is that it is a thing that other people will use, which means immediately, the moment we're talking about something that's a product, we're talking about something that has to have, or does have, product market fit. There is a question, does this thing actually match a real need that people have out there? And sometimes you see amazing libraries which go nowhere, and they don't go anywhere because nobody hears about them. But you also see amazing libraries that go nowhere and nobody uses because they're solving a problem that people don't have, or they don't think they have. And so product market fit is something that we have to, that any library, that any API that we design, it has to engage with, right? The API, the thing that you're providing for people to interact with, has to match what they feel that they need. Are you with me so far? And that means you have a limited set of options for achieving product market fit. And actually, I should say the first one, which I didn't even put on the list, is blind luck, which is also, there are absolutely libraries that are successful just because no effort was put into it at all. They just happen to succeed. So you can just be struck by lightning. But you can, one, be your target audience. Your identity and the identity of your target market are the same. And this is the most powerful thing we have as developers who are building tools for developers. And this is also why the JavaScript ecosystem, if you're involved in it, is one of the most exciting ecosystems to be a part of, because for the most part, the tools we use as developers in the JavaScript ecosystem are built with JavaScript, which means we can actively make our own lives better. And that is often not true in life at all. If you are using almost any other set of tools, the things that you do are probably not build the tools that you use, right? You probably don't have that as one of your core skill sets. But if you build JavaScript, you have the ability to change your own life. And I would love at some point, just to, by the way, to spend some more time talking about this. Can I just say, build a personal CLI if you haven't, just for you. Not to open source to anybody, just to make your life better. Because once you taste the power of transforming your own life for the better, it is so addictive. Okay, so anyway, that's the first thing. You can be your target market. But option 2 is you can actually be part of a diverse team. And can I say there's almost nothing more important than having a diverse team if you really want to meet people where their needs are? I could tell you horrifying stories about people who released a product and sent it to market, and it failed, and in failing, reveal that there was not a diverse team part of it. One of the famous stories is the soap dispenser in the lavatory. You put your hand in, a bit of soap comes down, and away you go, right? Principle is straightforward. How can you get that wrong? Only this one company released their soap dispenser, and they found out it didn't work for black people. Ooh. The optical recognition did not recognize anything other than white skin tone. Can I tell you, they had a serious diversity problem in their team for them not to notice that, right? But obviously that's not quite the same thing as software. But in fact, the kind of range of personality types and shapes of developer are very important when we come to building libraries. And if you only build things that you yourself, exactly you yourself, want, you will not achieve product market fit. So the best thing is to have people in your team who represent different points of view, who are different from you. By the way, can I say this is one of the, we often put this little divide here, and we have technical over here, and then we have like touchy-feely over there. Can I say that it is total rubbish, and you will be much better technically if you have a diverse team. Just putting that out there. 3, you can cultivate empathy, which is the quality of being able to put yourself and imagine what somebody else is feeling and how they are engaging with something. Another touchy-feely thing, which, by the way, will make you a much better developer for many reasons. So those are your options, I think, if you want to achieve product market fit. And if you achieve it in the developer tool ecosystem, then something happens that is truly magical, and this does look a little bit evil. Like Lord of the Rings type thing. But no, I'm not suggesting that we'll forge a new ring of power, or maybe you will, but a good one. No, the idea is you achieve a virtuous circle. So what happens is people use your thing, your library, whatever, and they enjoy it, and then they discover something that could be better. And then they make it better by submitting some kind of pull request or merge request. And it gets merged, and then it gets better, and more people use it. And that goes round and round and round. It's a virtuous circle, because the more it happens, the more it happens. And you get a scenario where you have something which can become incredibly popular. Now, I promise I don't think that highly of myself, but I'm going to use an example from this year. But I should just say first that the whole concept of the virtuous circle relies on what I think is the core value of the web, which is choice. Choice is the ability to choose what you use and what you don't use, to adopt something or not adopt something. It's the opposite of lock-in. It's the opposite of being forced to use something. Those are qualities that are associated with bitterness and resentment. If you have ever been forced to use software that you don't want to use, you resent. You begin to resent the IT team. And then you begin to resent the company that created that software. And then the hatred wells in you. And then you turn to the dark side. No, but I mean, that's true, isn't it? And openness is the opposite of that. If you want people to delight and enjoy using what you provide, you give them choice. Now, the concept is not just that you give them choice to use your library at all, which is obviously true, but you give them choice also in what degree they use your library. So they should be able to, I'll talk a bit more about this in a moment, but you give them choice into how much to step in to the stream. Do they just want a toe in? Do they want a whole foot? Do they want to be wading through it? Do they want to be swimming? Whatever, you're giving them options to progressively adopt. And that or unadopt if they need to. And that produces delight and that produces joy. So here is an example that is, by the way, nothing to do with any credit to me. I feel the need to say that. So I posted on Blue Sky earlier this year, and I said, hey, I would love to know people's frustrations with NPM JS. Has anyone here used npm.js.com? Okay, if you are not one of those people, it looks like this. This is npm.js.com, and it's a website for the package registry that's used in JavaScript. So maybe you've gotten a feel of what it's like to use there. And so I asked what people liked about it, what they didn't like about it, and immediately, I don't know if you can see, but there were 50 responses to that, and then later that day I posted another one, and people just kept on replying because they had so much bottled up rage and resentment and bitterness, because there was just this website, and it was frustrating them to no end, because it was probably last updated back in 2019. It's been updated more since then, actually since npmX was created. And so I created a little project called npmX. And it's like this. Or maybe I should show you what it's like when you go to the home page. And then you go to that web page. And then you have a look at the versions. And it has dark mode, which is not the main feature, but it was maybe faster, and people could contribute because it was open source for the first time. And there were so many opportunities for people to get involved, and everyone wanted to be involved. And so, oh, for goodness sake. And so, here is what happened. The first commit was in January. The day after I asked the question, and then 49 PRs were raised in the next day. 1,000, mostly PRs, were created. We merged one PR every 20 minutes, around the clock. We didn't merge them when we were asleep, so it means we probably merged them more than one every 20 minutes when we were awake. 1,500 stars by 16 days, 105 contributors, and then we decided that we cared more about the community than we did about hype, so we took a week's break and didn't allow anyone to do anything. And then we both hit Hacker News and 2,000 stars on holiday, and then released it as an alpha on the 3rd of March. And none of that was to my credit. In a sense, I happened to pick something that we all had that had this immediate product market fit. We as developers desperately wanted a better website, and now we have the opportunity to build that together. And so we have hundreds of people contributing. We have a core team that's, I think, probably about 10 people on the core team and 20 people on the maintainers, and we have hundreds of contributors. On Discord, we probably have about 700 people who are involved and engaged with it. If you want to, you're more than welcome to join in. But this is the point. When you have that kind of product market fit, where people are able to make a difference to their own lives, then you can really take off. And it meant that we all were engaged. So I contributed nearly 2,400 commits or PR reviews or whatever in 40 days, and I was not the only one, for sure. But I also don't want to just talk about the fact that we have to design APIs, and we have to work to make sure they meet the needs of the users. But I also want to talk about the fact that we design them for humans, and not ET, quite right, yes, good point. I don't know there are many people spending time talking about designing computer systems for the uses of aliens, but maybe we should. Or bots, that's absolutely an option too. But here is, I think, one of my spiciest takes, and I think this is absolutely true. Contributing.md is more important than agents.md. In other words, I could say people are more important than AI. And I will absolutely stand by that. And I think it's true. There are a number of reasons that this is true, ranging from how skeptical you are of AI to how skeptical you aren't. And I'll tell you where I stand in a moment. But first, because if you're designing something to be intuitive, intuitive is intuitive. Large language models are language models. They're trained by and large on human artifacts. We don't know to what extent they might be trained on alien technology, but by and large, they're trained on human artifacts. And if something is intuitive, for humans, it's intuitive for AI as well. In fact, I would even take this the opposite way around. If you want to figure out a good API for your library, which is intuitive, feel free to ask an LLM. What do you think would be, what are the exports of this library? How do you use it? Because it's going to come back with probably a very plausible explanation of a non-existing piece of technology, which you can mine for, that sounds interesting. That does seem intuitive. Or maybe the other way around. So here's an example of a project I'm working on at the moment. This is an open PR on Nuxt.com, and we're extracting it out as a library, so anybody will be able to use it soon. If you try and go to that Git repo, it's currently private. I'm sorry about that, but you can see the Nuxt pull request if you're interested. And sorry, this is a bit small, but the idea here is that every single error or info message in Nuxt is going to have a unique error code. It's going to have a description. There's going to be a link to a web URL that describes it and gives code examples and cross-references everything. And then there's also a fix suggested. Now, all of this is, one, to help humans, because our error messages were bad, and they didn't have an easy way for people to find out more information about them. But two, this is brilliant for AI, because it immediately gives them the fix, it gives them documentation, it gives them everything they need in the moment. So intuitive is intuitive. Focus on what works for humans, and you will, as an after effect, make things better for agents too. Second, if you care about humans, you care about how humans are consuming and coding. And the fact is that a lot of them are using LLMs. They're using AI coding tools, which means if you want to empower humans, you need to empower them to use coding tools as well. And third, and this is, I think, a really important point, teams, and this is, I hope it's okay for me to say this, teams are better than individuals with agents. And probably a lot of us are individuals. In fact, I think we all are. And the tempting thing is often when you build a library, to build it on your own and build it with however you can. Maybe that means using a coding agent, which is totally fine, of course. But I think part of it is also our desire to be 10x developers. Can I ask? No, I won't. I would guess that most of us here either want to be a 10x developer, or we think that we know a 10x developer and we're in awe. Actually, we might already today have heard from one or two 10x developers. But the fact is that although 10x, there are absolutely real people who are 10x developers. Do you know where it comes from, by the way? It was a study maybe 20, 30 years ago, some time ago, that looked at the output of teams in companies. And they found that there were some people who produced 10 times more output than the median person in the company. And this 10x figure, which was related to the particulars of that study, it wasn't about seniority, by the way, but that figure sticks in people's minds because it is one of these mimetic figures that just has an echo. Right? We all want to be a 10x developer. We want to admire 10x developers. And there have been a few projects this year. Maybe you have some of your own. So vNext was an amazing example earlier this year of someone basically taking Next.js and giving it to a team of agents and saying, reproduce this, but don't use TurboPack or Webpack. I want you to use Vite. a different build tool. And it cranked through lots and lots and lots of tokens, and eventually, ta-da, a full framework came out. Or M- was recently released. It is designed to be the spiritual successor of WordPress. And a similar kind of thing, 2 people built it with loads and loads of agents. WordPress is a massive project. You can't really do that with just one person, but these 2 people did it with lots of agent support. Evan Yu, who created Vue and Vite, recently released a new framework called Void, which he built with teams of agents running in the background in, I think, January to March. And all of this omits one thing. Can you guess? It absolutely omits 10x teams, because at the end of the project, what you have is one person and a full project, which is sprung fully formed out of the head of Zeus, right? It's done, but where are the people who are going to maintain it? I don't know about you, but the reason I love open source is because of the people. The whole point of open source is me saying, hey, look at this thing that I built. What do you think? And someone else saying, hey, I like it. Actually, it could be better. What do you think about this? If we got rid of the people, we wouldn't have open source. Why would we care about it? If I didn't care about anyone else, then why release it? What's the whole point of something like GitHub except a place for people to come together and build something amazing together and have fun while doing it? Coding with friends online is what open source is about. And I will tell you, guess what? No amount of tokens can produce you a community of people that you want to be around. You can produce the code. I will tell you, every KPI of every company, if it involves lines of code written, it's going to have to be changed. Because actually 5 years ago, lines of code was not that difficult as a metric. Anyone can write lots of code. The difficult thing was always writing good code, right? Figuring out what you needed to do. And today in 2026, agents are incredible, by the way. What an amazing feat of technology, but it just makes it easier to produce loads of code. And that actually isn't what matters, and it never has been. But maybe it means we can spend more time focusing on what does. And one of the things that matters is people, iterating with people, which is the other point of this, if I have even remembered what I'm saying. The point is, I can rant sometimes, I'm sorry about that. The point is, iteration is much less impressive, but it achieves much better results. And that might shock you because it shocked me. Because if you admire the 10x developer like I do, in my heart of hearts, you imagine that they go away in their ivory tower and then they come down with a perfect program. And they give it to the waiting world. That is nonsense. Because, yeah, maybe. But actually, if you don't go into a tower, but sit around with some people around a round table and build something, and actually loads of people contribute, and then it's actually wrong, and you actually have to release a major version because it wasn't quite right, and you produce lots of bug fixes because stuff isn't working, and then you figure out you should do it a different way, and then actually that thing is much better at the end of the day than the stone tablets that come down from the ivory. No, that's mixed metaphor. Anyway, it's much better to iterate, and you make something that's much better at the end of the day than if you just produce something which looks amazing. Okay, that's why I think we should design APIs for people. Now, how much time do we have left? Okay, I'm not going to take too long. Sorry about this. So how are you going to start? So first, you identify your audience, right? You figure out who you're writing for. And by the way, can I suggest you always write for yourself? Because if you're thinking of those, or at least if you're doing it for fun, write for yourself. People sometimes ask me, I want to get involved. I want to get involved in open source. How can I find a project to be involved in? Don't do it that way. Really, really don't. Find a project you're already involved with, that you're already using, that you are building something with, maybe, and contribute to that. I guarantee it will make your life much better because you will be the audience for your own fix. Talk to them. If you're working in a company context, your audience might be your internal team. So you want to figure out where people are coming from, what problems people are facing. Be mindful, of course, of the XY problem, which you might be, I'm sure you're familiar with. The idea, you ask somebody, what do you want to do? And they tell you one thing, but that isn't really what they want to do. You know, someone says, you say, so, hey, what's your problem? And our problem is we really need to figure out a way to connect Microsoft Excel to our email, and we need to do that. And that's actually not the problem. The problem, they shouldn't be using Excel at all. And you know, that's the kind of scenario. Pick a North Star, so aim for progressive adoption. The idea, as much as possible, is that people should be able to discover your features as you go. They shouldn't need to understand everything about your library before they get started, right? That's appropriate maybe for a programming language, possibly, and really isn't even ideal for that. You want stuff to be incrementally adoptable. You want things to be backwards compatible, and when you release new versions of your library, you want to make them work for people who've been using the old ones. We had a terrible, terrible, terrible story of this in Nuxt, going from Nuxt version 2 to Nuxt version 3. So we completely rewrote almost everything about the project. I'm not sure there was a single line of code that was the same between version 2 and version 3. And there were issues that caused us to need to do that. We were working with breaking changes. A new version of Vue had been released that had totally different reactivity in the background. Webpack version 5 had come out, but not only was that a breaking change, but we also had a totally new build system called Vite, which if you're not familiar with, you totally need to find out because it is amazing. But it meant we pivoted towards creating a bundler-agnostic architecture in Nuxt, which we had never had before. And anyway, we did lots and lots and lots of things, and it was a totally different framework. And we did a terrible, terrible job at making the thing backward compatible. And to this day, I'm really hoping that the 8 people in the room who've heard of Nuxt before did not ever use Nuxt 2, because in that case, I might need a protection detail. Honestly, it was awful. And it does mean that we now prioritize, more than anything else in our new major versions, backwards compatibility. And I even aspire to have a major version every year in order to give people confidence that there can be breaking changes that do not cause them to cry, and do not cause me to cry as well. And build with others, and don't become the bottleneck, which you do if you force everything to go through yourself. I think one of the things I would also suggest, if you have the option at all, build in a plugin system or some way for your project to be extensible so that other people can change it, even without the need to make PRs centrally. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of desire paths. So desire paths are, I see 1 or 2 people nodding. So desire paths are the idea that this is a path that was created not by the planner, and not by the architect, but by people choosing it. And you see it because often they're worn into the grass, where, you know, only 15 people need to go over a piece of grass in order for a path to become visible. And once it becomes visible, more people gravitate towards it, right? And it's much better if we can recognize these patterns of behavior from other people that are accumulating around the libraries that we create and adopt them in to the library and basically learn from what people are doing. There are countries, and there are planners, by the way, who will do this deliberately. I was reading about one university campus that did exactly this. They put just grass down and waited to see where people would walk, and then they laid the paths there. In some Scandinavian countries, people wait for snow, and then they see what's going on. But it's a wonderful pattern, and it's worth adopting at the framework or the library level. So Nuxt is a project of the community. It's built by the community, and that means that the ideas and what people want to build are not set in a roadmap. I don't come out with a list of things that I want people to work on, because the concept of open source isn't that. Nobody is building some cool feature for Nuxt because I told them to do it. Why would they do that? They build it because they want to do it, because it somehow fits a need that they face. And my problem is figuring out what I have to say no to. more than I have to figure out what I want to encourage people to create. And we have over 1,000 contributors who are building it. And we have this concept called modules, which allows anyone to create an integration with it that will actually fundamentally change how Nuxt works. Here's an example. So I built this last year, I think. So if you have a website that has maybe a third-party font like this, probably you're familiar with something like this, layout shift. And Nuxt Fonts does a couple of things to resolve that. And it makes it look like this. It prevents the layout shift. And it does that in a couple of different ways. It detects the fonts you're actually using in your CSS. So it will spot that, and then it will download on its own the fonts that you need from Google Fonts or Bunny or wherever they're coming from, stick them in your project, and create CSS that matches it. And it does all of this just as part of the build process. And then it detects the difference between that font and the fallback font that you're using in your project, and it creates the metrics required for that font, effectively the fallback font in your project, in this case Arial, to be squished into the shape of the custom web font you're using. And the point is, all of this is something that users could absolutely do, but why should they have to? So we can do this for them. And so if we do all of that, we end up creating something like this. There's still going to be a flash as the font is downloaded, but it's one that doesn't shift the layout. And also people aren't having to add third-party origins. It's all in their own project, and so on. So let's quickly show you what progressive enhancement looks like from a Nuxt project. I'll open. Oh, I forgot. I even had a clever type. Thank you. OK, here is a basic Nuxt project. It's pretty simple. This is a minimal one. I'll start the dev server. And here we go. This is your basic Nuxt app. Now we have dev tools, which are part of how we expose and allow people to discover things for themselves without having to figure things out. Because if you're looking at this basic project, it doesn't tell you a lot. There's just this app.vue file, and there's a Nuxt config file, and basically that's it. So if you want to discover some of the other things that you can do, we have this explorable dev tools that shows you a little bit about what you can do, for example. So you can install a new module. So we could have a look for Nuxt fonts, and we could install it. And that's going to, in the background, download and install the module, restart Nuxt, and now we have our custom web fonts module. So if I were, let's make this change here. If I were to now go into the app.vue, we have Hey Lisbon. And if I were to then go into the project, and let's see, style, font family, what's a good custom web font? Oh, someone said something. Comic Sans. Let's try that. Although, is that a custom web font? I'm not sure it is. I don't think we can download that from. There's another one. There's Comic Code, maybe. Anyway, I'll use one that we can definitely use, like Poppins. We could do Inter or something like that. Montserrat. There we go. And so in the background, what's happening is this font request is coming in and being downloaded from the local dev server. It's not having to go anywhere else to get it. And we could expose that information to our users as well at the level of the dev tools that I was talking about. So we could actually give people a font dev tools, which shows them the different fonts that we've loaded in and that the project knows about. And then we could actually have a look and see what the different ones do. So users can explore and discover things. There's lots of options and lots of ways people can explore, from Open Graph to actually having a look at the code transforms that happen, and so on. And all of that is about making the invisible visible. So how to expose some of the magic that we're doing behind the scenes for users. But let me quickly create a new module just to demonstrate what the process of that is. Okay, so here's a basic module that I created earlier, a module playground. And every module that we create from the Nuxt point of view starts with a real app built in that module. So we can actually run a sample application here. So that's going to fire up a module playground. And we could do exactly the same thing that we did before. So we have a Nuxt module playground. And what I always suggest is that people start by making changes within their own app. So in this case, for a Nuxt module, it's fine. We can do it in the playground. But in your own project, you might find that you're building your own library in code within your project. You're building it locally, and you're building it for yourself. Doing something like that means you get the chance to test whether it works and make the changes that you have to make. I, in fact, would always suggest you maybe do that once or twice before you extract it into some shared code that you give to other people. So in this case, we might do something like we have our module, and maybe we want to do something like we maybe want to add a plugin, a Vite plugin, and we're just going to do a we're going to do a transform. And we're going to say if code includes, what is our Nuxt module playground, then we can simply transform that. So return code, hello, SINFO. Okay, so this is obviously a very bad module. Don't do this. But it works. It's transforming the code for us. So I've written this amazing plugin, and now I feel everyone should be able to have it. So I can extract it. So I'm going to take that out and just drop it into my module over here. And I'm going to, we have an SDK for Nuxt. So I can just add a plugin like this. And that now is going to become part of the plugin. And as long as my module here is part of the modules list, for the playground, I should be able now to restart that. And let's try this. There we go. So now we're importing the module, and it's working. It's making the change as required. And now we might want to have some stuff like some options. So we would want to have something like a location, and it's going to be SINFO by default. So we're going to pop that in here. Oh, we need to add this as a possible option. There we go. Cool. So we have our option. We have a default value. And now we might try doing something like this. We're going to set the location option. And we're going to say Lisbon. And no. Am I doing everything right? Yeah, it's working. So we've created a module, and we've made it configurable. And the idea by starting out from something you're actually using in your own project, identifying the need, now this, to be fair, is not a very impressive one, but you could do exactly the same kind of thing, and I have done countless times. Start with something that you're using, figure out the need for it, and then pull it out into something that you can actually share with other people and distribute. It is a winning strategy. So I'm aware we're coming up to time. So I just want to say, designing APIs for humans, it's all about the touchy-feely. It's about, one, being your own target market, cultivating empathy, building with people who are different from yourself, And always, always, always targeting people, because that is what matters in all of this. If you're interested in anything that I've talked about, do feel free to have a look at the Nuxt docs. Message me on Blue Sky or somewhere else. That would be amazing. And I should say, I also have an open diary. If you want to book a 10-minute call with me at any point. Obviously, it's better to have a coffee, but if you want a 10-minute call, you can have that too. I have ro.dev/chat, and my diary's open there. But it has been a real pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Daniel. We have a bit of time for a Q&A if anyone has a question. Maybe no questions.
Hi. Why should we use Nuxt?
Why should you use Nuxt? Well, first, you don't have to. So I should say that framework wars in general, and the idea that often people have of big divides between different frameworks is something I totally do not agree with. Fundamentally, we're coders, we're engineers, we're people who use tools, we're artisans. The tools that we use are not so important. Now, I do think there are good reasons to use Nuxt, and I'll tell you what they are, but I'm not saying that from a zero-sum point of view. So first, I think Nuxt has some really good conventions, and I think the power of using conventions is shown by something like Tailwind CSS. Whatever you think of Tailwind CSS as a concept, writing your CSS in classes in the HTML, it proves the resounding power of convention. The idea that anyone can drop into a Tailwind CSS project and know exactly how it works and exactly how to write those classes because there's this one standard that everybody using Tailwind CSS uses. Now, Nuxt, we don't have an opinion on the CSS, but we have a lot of conventions. They're all configurable, but the idea that anyone should be able to drop into a Nuxt project and know how it works is really important for bigger enterprises and people who are using it. It's easy to move people from project to project. Two, I think the fact that Nuxt is extensible, it's all to do with the fact that we are a community project and people are building it, who want to be able to customize it. The fact that it's extensible is a real reason to adopt it. It's not a monolith. New features don't have to come through a bottleneck of people building them. Anyone can add them, and anyone can publish their own thing to the marketplace. And I think that's a really big reason to use it too. And also, we're pretty friendly, and we're a nice bunch.
Thank you very much.
First, thank you very much for your time. Why shouldn't we use Nuxt? And what would be the alternatives and why? Thank you.
So Nuxt aims to be as much as possible. So one, I think in most cases you should use a framework. Frameworks exist because if you don't use frameworks, you will be creating your own framework. Those are really your options. So if you're building a website or a web app, then you are either using or creating a framework. So maybe you don't want to use Nuxt because you're not doing that. You're not building a website. Maybe you're building a library or something like that. That's a good reason not to use it. Maybe you have a preference in terms of the developers on your team, and you would rather not use Vue, for example. Nuxt is built on Vue. And you might want to pick something like Tanstack Start or Next.js or something like that. Then there are loads and loads of options. I think you want to assess any framework you're looking at in terms of not just the technical features it has, but also its community health. What is it like to be a part of the community? How are new ideas treated? How are people treated? Because that's going to make a big difference to what it's like to maintain this over the long term and not just in the present moment. I think there are a lot of good options out there if you don't want to use Nuxt. But in general, I would say one of the things people most often say about different frameworks is that they don't know how to use Vue or they don't know how to use React. And I would say that is the least significant issue when choosing a framework, because anyone who knows any UI library can learn a different one. It's not that big of a division.